The Department of Homeland Security preparing to make good on President Obama's campaign promise to shift focus from illegal immigrants over to the employers who hire them. Now, Secretary Napolitano is expected to direct agents to target the businesses knowingly hiring illegal workers. Is this the right way to go? Let's bring in Stuart Verdery. He is a former Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security under President Bush. Jim Harper is the Director of Information Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, a member of the Department of Homeland Security Data, Privacy, and Integrity Advisory Committee. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds really good. Stuart, let me start with you. There is, after all, there is a little inexorable logic to this, I must say. If an employer, out of fear of getting busted, stops hiring the illegals will have no place to go. That'll stop them from coming in. I mean, in other words, you cut off the demand, the supply dwindles, right?
Well, you certainly get a bigger bang for the enforcement buck if you're going after businesses that are employing illegal aliens in large numbers, and especially if they're involved in the seamier sides of this practice, you know, document fraud, smuggling people into the country, any kind of connection to organized crime, and the kind of activity we've seen on the southern border. So I think certainly we need to be focusing the worst of the worst. We haven't controlled our borders for decades. We've put more money into the system, and we need to be doing that. But I will say that we should not be going after the individual agents in the government, the ICE agents who are doing the job as Congress has directed them. They're doing a good job. Let's give them the tools that they need to do their job.
Listen, these are good guys. They're doing a good job. Under the law, Jim, it's illegal if an employer knowingly hires illegal workers. Now, that word knowingly, you know, is used often in the law, and it's very, very tricky. Because in the absence of an effective method for verifying a worker's status, it's easy for the employer to plead ignorance. So isn't that a loophole that needs to be closed?
No, it's not. You got to look at the whole policy. Employer sanctions has been an experiment we've been trying since 1986. It's never had any effect on illegal immigration. You know, the U.S. is an economic magnet, and I'll tell you something, magnetism passes through paperwork. So all the stuff we've asked employers to do these past 20-plus years, it hasn't affected the thing. It's not working. Now, typical of the federal government, we're talking about doubling down on it. During the Bush administration, we had ugly raids on workers. Now we're going to have ugly employer sanctions. The solution is to have a free country. That is a country where people who want to come here and work can work. People who don't work, they don't eat.
Well, but they got to come here legally, you would agree.
Yes, and we should make it legal to come here, and that's the main problem. Since the 1986 reform, we haven't had appropriate immigration rates, and that's the cause of all these problems. That's the cause of the raids on workers. It's the cause of employer sanctions.
Stuart,
just make it a free country. Let's get away from that.
Stuart, I have a feeling you want to rebut that. Do you?
Well, I really think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We certainly need to reform our immigration laws and allow willing workers to come in legally, whether they're high-skilled workers or essential workers. At the same time, you know, I stopped at the ATM on the way over here. In 3 seconds, Visa can tell me whether or not I have money in the bank account. There's no reason, the high-tech country that we are, we can't give employers the tools to tell instantaneously if somebody is legitimate to work. And those who want to skirt the rules, they ought to be tracked down. They ought to be gone after. They ought to be punished. We've got to give the American people confidence that their jobs are being protected.
Jim, give me a yes or no on this, because I have a follow-up. Yes or no, we've got to go after both the employers who are breaking the law and the illegals who come here breaking the law, right?
It's not a yes or no question. You've got to improve the policy first.
Are you saying that we should not enforce the law as to illegals who break the law or employers who break the law? Are you telling me that?
An unjust law is an attack on the rule of law. If you want the rule of law in this country, you have to line up the laws with what the people want.
So you're in bed with Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, who in front of, she was caught on videotape, a group of illegals. She said the laws here in America are un-American and you illegals are patriotic. You agree with Nancy Pelosi?
I'm interested in the best policies for the country, the best policies for Americans.
You agree with Pelosi?
We pay lower prices, we get higher quality.
That's an easy yes or no.
Hard workers coming into this country.
Pelosi was right or wrong?
Pelosi or any politician. I don't pay attention to Nancy Pelosi. Sorry, can't do it.
Well, certainly we should not be going after the agents who are doing a good job, but we ought to be giving businesses the tools to do the right thing. And that's something that only Congress can do, and they ought to do this year, is have an instant check system that works. And also, if they want to bring in willing workers for jobs that Americans can't or won't do, or high-skilled workers, we ought to give them those tools and those quotas that we can bring those people in and create jobs and help restore our economy. It's that simple.
Stuart, when Nancy Pelosi calls illegals patriotic and calls the laws un-American, does that have the effect of insulting legitimate American citizens who do consider themselves to be not only patriotic, but who obey the law?
Well, look, I think it's unreasonable to cast 12 million people or so with a broad brush. There are certainly many people who came here trying to support their families who are not criminals and have broken the law to come in, but are good, hardworking people, and we ought to figure out a way to adjust their status. But at the same time, the fact that we've got 12 million people running around undocumented, bad driver's licenses, these kinds of things is untenable, and we've got to put the money in to build a system that works. So I think we can do more than one thing at one time. It's not a simple question, and again, we should not be going after the agents who are doing the job that Congress has directed them to do.
Jim Harper, you get the quote of the day. You don't pay attention to Nancy Pelosi. Jim Harper, Stuart Verdery, thank you both.